Dennis, thank you so much for joining us today. As we start, can you say a few words about your current organization and your role?
Yeah, so I currently am the director of cybersecurity at Honest Medical Group. Honest Medical Group is a startup. It's been around for, I think, almost 2 years now. And the goal of Honest Medical Group is to increase the healthcare for patients,
Hmm.
while also adding, profitability for the payers. So our approach, to oversimplify it, is the value-based care, where the patient is getting the holistic and full picture of care, and then maximizing that care for our patients, while still
Hmm.
partnering with our payers in Medicaid, Medicare.
I understand. I understand. That paints the picture, and then um, that's that gives us a sense of where you are now. But to get a sense of the trajectory of the career trajectory, can you say a few words? How did you get into cybersecurity? What was the starting point?
So cybersecurity for me, I know a lot of folks have different paths. So I was in the military. When I left the military, I became a police officer. I was a police officer for almost 17 years,
Oh
and I
wow.
realized that I needed a career change when I noticed that everyone retiring from law enforcement went right back into law enforcement. I'm originally from Louisville, Kentucky, and I noticed, my observation was is the Ford's real big in Louisville. There's a couple Ford plants. I was like, folks aren't retiring from Ford and then going to work for Chevy or Hyundai, right? Or going back to the Ford plant. And a lot of police officers, when they retire, they go to other police departments or they come back to their department after a period of time. And I was like, I've got to be capable of more than that. And I had always had a proclivity to computers. So I started going to school, changed careers. Um, and then while I was going through school and changing my careers, the reserves called me back to active duty. And that's a whole long story within itself. I was in the Marine Corps, combat vet during the first Gulf War, did 6 years with the Marine Corps, changed to the Army Reserve. So the Army Reserve called me back to active duty during the second Gulf War, but I was in a unit that trained all the folks going to combat. And I was going through school. I was getting my bachelor's in cybersecurity, so I had an opportunity to work in IT while I was called back to active duty.
Hmm.
So I had 4 years of real time, hands-on experience, certifications obtained, finished my master's degree while I was doing that, and then was able to join back into the civilian workforce, with my first IT job. Everywhere I've gone, I've started building cybersecurity programs, putting the cybersecurity aspect into the business decisions where it didn't exist. Um, and that just continued to grow. I always look for roles that continue to grow myself into a cybersecurity career. I knew I had a goal objective of being a CISO. So every job I took, everything I did, I laid the foundations for that. And then eventually I landed my first CISO job. And now, even though my title is director of cybersecurity, it's a CISO role, and it's my fourth CISO role. So it's a different introduction than most others, but everything I did laid that groundwork to get to where I'm at today.
Interesting. Interesting. I you're absolutely right. It's we've done probably dozens and dozens of interviews, and I don't think there is there is kind of one path. It's people take different paths to it. Sometimes it's through technology into cybersecurity. Sometimes from military duty to cyberspace. So it's interesting, but I don't think anyone I interviewed had experience as a police officer. I think it gives you a very interesting perspective from so many different angles. Um, well, things have changed over the years, and I think cybersecurity as a space, as an industry, has evolved and have grown pretty dramatically. And I think as a result, a lot more people are looking into it as kind of a growth industry and a place where they see themselves making a career. But there are so many shiny pennies. There are so many ways to spend your time, uh, and just from your vantage point, from your experience, what would you recommend maybe some of the junior professionals, or even more upstream of that, maybe even students in colleges and whatnot, if as they're looking in the space, what are the 2, 3 things in your view they should focus on to set them up for success?
Yeah, I've posted about this on LinkedIn and spoke on it often. So cybersecurity, I'm gonna give you the long version. So hopefully I don't take the whole interview to talk about this. But cybersecurity is a very rewarding career. It's one of the reasons why I enjoy it, because it changes every day. When I was first getting into IT, so I started, and I didn't start with a cybersecurity title. I started with an IT title. Um, but I quit jobs because my biggest decision for the day was which direction I was going to spin in my chair for the day. So it wasn't challenging. It wasn't rewarding, right? It didn't have impact and value to myself or the organization. So that's a big draw for it. Some of the advice I give folks, and I try to condense it, is stop falling for these people that tell you it's for everyone. Anyone can do it. Take my course and you can get, like the Instagram influencers where it's like, you can make millions of dollars if you pay me $9.99, right? To get, don't work. It's like, and I said I was a police officer earlier, but you can talk about firefighters or EMTs. Not everyone can do that. You have to have an aptitude and certain, skills, I guess you could say, that lend to you being proficient. So it's like race car drivers or pro NBA basketball players. Everyone would love to be a pro NBA player, but not everyone can, right? So make sure it aligns with your career goals, your skill sets, and your directions. First of all, right? Don't fall for this propaganda that it's easy to do, it's easy to get into, and everyone can do it. Now, can anyone do it with the right amount of dedication and devotion? Absolutely. But there's LeBron James and there's the walk-ons, right? One works a little harder than the other one to get to that same result. None of us will be LeBron James. There's only one. So don't fall for the propaganda, I guess, is what I'm trying to say shortly.
Really? Well, I think it's also, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was saying, then the rest of it is, it's such a wide industry. So that same propaganda goes, get into cybersecurity. But what they fail to tell folks that are interested in cybersecurity is there's so many different branches of cybersecurity. So really get out there and explore it. There's governance, there's risk management, there's incident response, there's architecture, and many, many branches of that tree. So explore them and focus on one area. You will overwhelm yourself if you try to learn the umbrella of cybersecurity. Now, if you want to be a CISO over time, you need to understand the umbrella of cybersecurity so you can direct those teams. You also have to have some proficiency in IT as well. So where in the IT side, where a network engineer needs to understand, the OSI model and VPNs and network connectivity, as a cybersecurity expert, if you're going to have a wide breadth of that, you've got to understand all of it so you can lend value of helping develop and deploying cybersecurity solutions, right? So that the biggest one is focus, don't fall for the propaganda, and you might have to work really hard, but you can get there.
Certainly. It's interesting. So it sounds like in the beginning, it would make sense to go broad and shallow to get exposure to different areas of cybersecurity. Well, one, to understand the entire landscape, the 360 of it, but also to identify areas that are more of interest and align more with career objectives, but also with aptitude. Because one thing that we realize, if you're passionate about it, it's really hard to stay focused and dedicated, and you really need a decade or so to really kind of learn what you need to learn and to make a career out of it. So if it's don't get distracted by shiny pennies, and if you're looking for something quick, this is not it. But it's if you're drawn to the challenges, if you're drawn to the ever-changing, ever-evolving nature, it could be a good career for you.
Yeah, and absolutely. I think a good example that I had the benefit of doing at least one organization is creating a general cybersecurity analyst position. And I rotated that person through all the branches of my team. Most people I interview that are trying to get into cybersecurity, they want to be pen testers, the sexy job, until they realize what that really involves and the report writing and all the unsexy parts of pen testing. So I hire folks like that, but I rotate them through. And I had one individual rotated through all the teams. They had never even really understood GRC, governance, risk, and compliance. Well, that's where they naturally had an aptitude towards. So when they hit that group, without even knowing what it was, they just took to it. So I know for a fact that that person that I hired and rotated through, and when their little rotation period was over, we put them in GRC. That person's now the manager of the GRC group. Many years after I've left, they're still there and they're still loving it, still exceeding. So it's just a good example of how you can get an opportunity to do that. So
Interesting. It makes a lot of sense. Kind of switching gears a little bit. It seems there are so many different things that people are anxious about or concerned about. It seems like cloud security is top of mind for quite a few people. Identity access management. From your perspective, what do you think are some of the 2-3 most prevalent big themes that are either people are anxious about or concerned about on the CISO side of things? It could be technology. It could be technology. It could be career development related topics, or like what are the. I just want to get a perspective on what some of the themes are that, from your view, are kind of prevalent and top of mind.
So my prevalent things that I've seen. So I've been doing this for almost 19 years now, and there's some things that's not changed that has been hindrances to good cybersecurity. One is the cybersecurity department thinks they are the end all be all, right? It's an unquestionable requirement parameter of business, when we have to realize that we are a very small part of the overall business decision making and risk of a business, right? I have a mantra that cybersecurity should be where business decisions are being made. So it is paramount. It's absolute importance. Look at MGM. They've learned that lesson the hard way last week, right? But we have to make sure that we're not the only part of that, and how we apply to that part of it. The thing that ties into that's at the top of the mind for me too, though, is the organization contributing to cybersecurity? So everyone will tell you we take cybersecurity seriously until you ask them for the budget. So this movement of having cybersecurity leaders such as myself on boards to direct companies, I think is a smart move if we get there, because you got to put your money where your mouth is. That's been the same way. I've gone to jobs and heard we take cybersecurity seriously, and then I say, well, here's my budget that you asked me to build a program, and they go, and I'm making up numbers. I say I need 1.5 million this year, and they go, well, here's $30,000, right? It's okay. What do you want me to do? Take everybody to lunch? I'll do that. The other thing is the human factors engineering. So this failure to educate, create a culture, and recognize that people are victimized, and long as there's been humans scamming humans, right? Before computers, it was the shell game and the 3-card ante. It's the same thing. It's just so more advanced now. The psychological profiles that are built on people, the sharing information on TikTok and Facebook, and giving them the means to attack us and take advantage of us. But there's always going to be a huge effort. You can have the multi-million-dollar budgets and buy every piece of technology you can to protect you, and one phone call, one phishing email will undo all that. So I think there's still a huge investment in the human factors engineering. There's a lot of industries that do human factor engineering well and have done it for decades. Cybersecurity needs to catch up to that, and that'll help bridge that gap. And then the other part of that is making sure that you're adding value. How do you look at the goals and objective of an organization and translate what you're doing in the cybersecurity program back to those goals? So we need to get away from talking about the FUD and the risk, and there's a time in the conversation for that. But the first part, the introduction, should be, we have a goal of increasing student enrollment by 3%. That's what you open up with in your cybersecurity program. Doing this contributes to the goal. or if you don't do this, that goal of the 3% will not be met. Then you can talk about all the other stuff that we like to talk about. So I think that's what I've seen over my career so far that has always existed, always been a hindrance, and will still take some time to fix.
It's interesting. The couple of threads. Well, thank you for sharing your insights. And just a couple of threads that I want to pull on. One is you mentioned human factor, and going back to your example of the MGM, I think what happened there is a third-party IT provider. There was a social engineering attack where this essentially an IT help desk was convinced to reset two-factor authentication, which allowed attackers access into the system, and they moved laterally, and they essentially bricked, as far as I understand. And I think both Caesars and MGM were attacked, and it's fairly devastating. And I think one of them paid $15 million, and it's still it's just the impact is just absolutely staggering from this one entry point. There's one person who was convinced that the person on the other end of the line, whatever the communication was genuine and not an attacker. It's just the effort that went into this attack versus the outcome versus the impact on the business is just absolutely asymmetrical.
Yes.
Which kind of drives the point that you made that you can invest hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars in the systems, but it's really if humans are your weakest point, and you're not investing in educating people and making them recognize patterns and just being suspicious and being trained, just seeing how phishing emails look like, seeing what successful attacks, attacks that kind of resulted in damage, what they look like, and what the impact on the business will be. So it's in the end of the day, cybersecurity is a team sport, and CISO and CISO's team cannot be the only team playing. It needs to be the entire organization, which I think was very interesting point. The other one, which is also I think very insightful, is the fact that yes, you need to be technical to be a successful cybersecurity executive, but at the end of the day, you cannot be what often other people in the organization call the department of no. You cannot be an impediment to business needs, and you really need to drive your agenda by being part of the bigger agenda of the business. It's really about alignment, which means that in addition to being technical, in addition to understanding the cybersecurity landscape, the tech stack, potential attack vectors, you also need to have a business degree and wear a business hat and just understand what other departments, what other parts of the organization are dealing with, and where the entire organization is going, so you are rowing in the same direction, not against. Because I think that more than anything would help get the resources, get the budget that will be necessary to keep the organization secure, which I thought was also very interesting as well.
Absolutely.
And switching gears, we're in an interesting space because on the one hand, Afinia is a community of cybersecurity executives, but also we partner with cybersecurity vendors, so kind of have a peek into that world as well. And as we talk to members, often every time we bring the topic of vendors, it's almost always we get a visceral reaction and response, because often CISOs are inundated by emails, calls, LinkedIn requests, and I think it's partially because how aggressive some of those vendors are, and just they respond to incentives, right? So the board is telling them to grow, and they're incentivizing their salespeople to more calls, more emails, which it becomes noise, becomes a hindrance, becomes annoyance. And some vendors have the patience and the common sense of building a long-term relationship, not focus on the transaction, providing value and adding to the conversation, providing actionable insights without asking really much, and really playing the long game, without naming names, protecting the innocent. In your experience, what are some of the examples of certain thing a vendor did that you thought was very on point and very insightful? And on the flip side, what are some of your pet peeves? And I'll tell you mine in a second.
Yeah, so I think I'll start with the pet peeves. And it's exactly what you said. Sending me emails, sending me LinkedIn messages, uh, phone calls. I think you heard my phone ring twice in this interview, and it was somebody in New York. I mean, it's probably a vendor. I mean, it's an unsolicited phone call. It's that in consideration for the time. It's in consideration the pestering, the high set, the high pressure sales. That's ineffective. I mean, don't you get it? We hang up on you, we block you, we mark you as junk and spam. I mean, have you really made sales by doing that? And even if someone has taken your phone call, have you made a sale? I mean, it builds. It doesn't build any trust for me. It makes you a hindrance. On the other side, like you said, though, it's building yourself as a business partner. So once I rely on you for your solution, if you establish yourself as a business partner and you have a vested interest in my success and my company's success, that's going to go far, right? That taking the time to understand, to me, if I had vendors that researched the industry, researched the business, took the time, because a lot of this information is on our websites. Our companies publish everything. I think we publish too much, but if you looked at our goals, you looked at our profit margins, you looked at it and go, here is what that company actually is doing and the concerns that they are expressing, and said, here's how we can help, right? In doing what I call a proof of value, not a sales pitch, not a demo. What's your proof of value and what's your added value? Those companies I found have provided the value, long-standing relationships. They take the time to become a business partner, and you can trust them, and they stick around for a long time. So
Certainly. Well, I promised I'll share mine. I sometimes receive invites to meetings that I don't know what they're about. I don't know the person, but it's almost like a calendar invite spam of sorts.
yes.
So in the hopes that someone will see it as a tentative on their calendar and just out of curiosity or out of fear that it's something important that will show up. But I think it's just so counterproductive and so aggressive. And I hear some of our members sometimes their cell phone, the personal cell phone rings very early in the morning during the weekend, and it's a vendor. It's just absolutely disastrous move. So I'm surprised that that people go through the lengths and doing something that clearly is counterproductive. I think, again, having the patience, playing the long game, focusing on value, and just delivering without asking is absolutely the way to build the kind of name recognition and bring trust, build trust and build a relationship, and really focusing on the on a longer business relationship, not just not being transactional. I think is the way to go. I know, Dennis, we're coming up on time a little bit as we wrap up. Well, first of all, I'm really appreciative of you taking time for this. This was very, very interesting, and thank you for sharing your story. As we wrap up, imagine if you had a crystal ball and you can see into the future, and then in the future, 12 months from now, 24 months from now, what would be some of the headlines? What are some of the 2-3 things that CISOs will, again, be excited about, anxious about, worried about? It could be technology, it could be anything. What are some of those things?
So I think the headlines for the next few years will be the same headlines we've been seeing for the last 18 years, and the same ones we'll see for the next 18 years. There's got to be changes. I know there's a lot of stuff happening in the U.S. Congress and in legislation in the states that are trying to make changes, and those are good things. I mean, there's some. I don't believe in too much government oversight, but there's also the trade-off at some point. Enough's not being done, so something has to be done to force people to get better at cybersecurity. But I don't think we'll see much changes in the headlines. Every year is like, here's the top trend, here's the top trends. Well, it's the same thing that was the top trends last year and years before that, and I bet you the year following it's going to be the top trends. But there's a fundamental shift that needs to be changed in business with the focus on cybersecurity. But with that said, some of the other things that if you're not thinking about, you're probably already behind on those is what is your strategy around artificial intelligence? A lot of folks are like, oh, stay away from it. It's too late. It's here. People are using it. So instead of talking bad about it and saying we shouldn't be doing it, you got to figure out how to use it to your benefit and how to build guidelines and frameworks around it. The other thing is quantum computing. I mean, it's here. You're going to, it's like the 5G, the capabilities that it's going to bring, you have to be ready for it. You can't wait for it to get here and figure it out. You've got to start thinking ahead. And I think that might be a problem with cybersecurity in business too, is you're not thinking about your cybersecurity program today and what it'll look like 3 years from now. And how are you building your program now to facilitate that need in 3 years where it's a little easier transition as opposed to the world's on fire and now you got gasoline pants on and what do you do? So
Interesting, because it's almost like you need to do you need to think of cybersecurity as to keeping your organization secure right now, but also building the infrastructure to keep it so in the future as well, in an environment where you don't really know which direction certain technologies will take. And specifically, I mean, I think I understand conceptual implications of AI, but quantum computing kind of scares me probably even more. With from what I understand, it's going to make cryptography and password protection way more challenging than it is now, for example, right? So it remains to be seen how those technologies will be, I'm sure, used and abused in certain ways. So it's certainly a topic of conversation. So maybe in 12 months, I suggest we get on a call and have another conversation and discuss where we are from the point to see how your predictions of sameness are different, or maybe some of the different topics will come to fruition. That's great. Dennis, again, thank you so much. Where can people find you? What's the best way to connect?
I'm pretty easy to find. You can Google me. I'm usually the first one that comes up. I'm on LinkedIn, Dennis Leber. You can go to dennisleber.com or leberconsultingllc.com. Pretty easy to find, but yeah, always open to connect.
Great. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.